Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbor Drove Over My Grass and Ruined My Garden. I destroyed her car. Summary. Karen drives over my property and destroys my grass. I ask her twice to stop doing it only to be told off and then ignored by her. Finally, I had enough and placed a boulder right in the middle of my yard that she had no way to get around. Instead of taking the road, she smashed right into the boulder and destroyed her front bumper. She tried to blame me, but the police could see that she was at fault and towed her and the car away. I haven't seen her since, and now the boulder is loved by my little kids to draw and play on. Mess with a mama bear and you get a giant boulder to the car. The gist: I had been dealing with this woman for a long time and never exactly catching her in the act before. With where my house is located, I can tell that someone had been using it as a shortcut to get to the main road faster. I find it especially stupid since it would only have been saving her a couple of minutes at most. I had never caught her in the act, and the only evidence was my lawn had been totally destroyed. Getting your lawn run over once or maybe even twice might not cause such an impact. Eventually though, the grass dies and starts to get ripped out, flowers are uprooted, and the whole lawn looks horrible. I was glad when I changed my schedule and got to start working from home. I made it my mission to find whoever was destroying my grass and tell them off for it. It didn't take long because only a couple days later I was taking a break outside while an SUV came barreling right over my yard. I had to jump up and run in order to get this woman's attention. Knowing what I knew afterwards, I am actually still shocked that she stopped at all. Woman. What? I am busy. She sounded like I was the one inconveniencing her, and the minute I saw her haircut and large sunglasses I knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Me. You are driving over my grass. Woman. And? Me. You are destroying it, and I have had to reseed 3 times already. She didn't answer me and instead rolled up the windows and drove off. I knew she was a Karen, but something in me wanted to think that she got the message. She was caught doing something and now she would stop and take the road like a normal person. The haircut didn't lie to me though, and 2 days later I caught her going over my yard again. She stopped, which again amazes me because she seems the type to ignore and keep going or even run someone over if they are in her way. Woman. Oh my God, what now? Me. You can't use my yard as a road. You are destroying it. Woman. It looks like a piece of shit anyway. Me. That is because you ruined it by driving over it so often. Use the road like a normal person and stay off of my land. Woman. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I am very busy. I need to pick up my kids from school and there is no way I am wasting time when I can take a perfectly good shortcut. Me. For the last time. It isn't a shortcut, it is my yard. She drives away again, leaving me frustrated and knowing that she just doesn't care. Talking wasn't going to work, and I felt like any more damage to my yard and the soil would be too ruined to replant grass seed at all. I was totally fed up at this point, and I spoke to my husband about what we could do to keep Karen off of our yard. Ideas like calling the police and taking a picture or video of her doing it in the act. Those things worked slowly though, and I needed her to stay off of my lawn now. Really though, I know I have been making it seem like this is all over some grass, but it is much bigger than that. Since this thing started, I have stopped my kids from playing in the front yard because I can't predict when she is going to show up and don't want them getting hurt. The backyard is much smaller, and it really isn't fair to them since they didn't do anything wrong. We finally figured out the solution to Karen, and it came in the form of a giant boulder. We placed it in our yard in such a way that there was no way she could go around it and instead would have to give up and take the road. I will admit that I didn't like the idea of a boulder in my yard because it looked so out of place, but actually it ended up working perfectly. Sometimes function needs to go over how pretty it will be. Back to Karen. I thought that I wasn't going to hear anything else from her, and if I did, it would be her banging on my door to complain about what I did with my own property. Instead, I get pulled out of doing work by a giant crash sound and I run outside to see what happened. It turns out Karen somehow ignored the giant boulder and tried to drive over my lawn again. She smashed right into it and her front bumper was destroyed. She was screaming so loud about how I broke her car, and she was going to call the police and have me put in jail. She was on the phone talking to the police, and for my own safety I locked myself in the house until they arrived. I don't know what she told them that got so many of them to show up, but I can guarantee that it was a lie. I asked them if they needed a statement or anything from me, but they told me that it wasn't really necessary. It was more than clear from the way her car looked that the only way it would have happened is her driving in the middle of my yard. Instead, they started to question Karen relentlessly about if she swerved or if she knowingly tried to cut through someone's property. If she didn't see the boulder in her way and if she was distracted by her phone or something to cause that. They knew right away that it was her fault, and I couldn't have magically attacked her car with a boulder that was in my yard. She got towed away and I was lucky enough to never see her again. I still kept the boulder in my yard because I was worried removing it would cause things to go back to how they were before. The grass and flowers got replanted, and after a while my yard started to look great again. Even the boulder that I thought was an eyesore ended up being okay and actually loved by my kids. They liked to draw all over it with chalk and paint, trying to make it pretty, as well as climbing on it. For 2 little kids it was like the best toy ever right in the front yard. At least I don't need to explain to them why we are the only house with a random boulder in front of it. I wish I knew if Karen got in a ton of trouble for what she had done, but I had no way of finding out. I do know from experience that a smashed bumper can be pricey to fix, and her insurance might not fork over the money to repair it. The next story is titled, "Arrogant Supervisor Messed with the Wrong Old Salt." I was a rookie cop in the 90s in a big US city. I had an old SALT veteran partner with over 20 years on the job, who was also a Vietnam veteran and gave no fucks. We got a new sergeant one day from another station, which was in a much more affluent area, who thought he was God's gift to law enforcement. He got wind that when we were on graveyard shift, we checked all our businesses for burglaries or damage at least once a shift. Our area had fewer businesses than usual, so it was possible if it wasn't too busy, but we ran a quick check before coming in even if it was 5 a.m. He didn't believe us and made some snarky comments about that, saying he'd rather have us out running traffic enforcement. My partner told him, "No, if a business gets broken into overnight, I want to at least be the one that finds it and not the owner." Which is true, but we also didn't really want to write a bunch of tickets in the early hours either. Our sergeant huffed about and didn't say anything else. There was one business where we had to physically get out of our car to check to see if it got hit. They had a hidden side door that was a common target for burglars. One night, I found a note stuck to that door: "District car, return this note to the station." Obviously, the sergeant was setting us up to see if we really checked all our businesses. I told my partner and he said, "Duck this guy," and snatched the note from me. I told him we should go turn it over this sergeant and he said, "No, I'll handle it and I'll take the heat." We went back to the station, but didn't see the sergeant. My partner told me to wait in the locker room. I was a rookie, so I obeyed. As the sergeant was getting off, we were down the street from the station, hidden, and my partner watching with binoculars. The sergeant strutted to his car, secure in the knowledge that he had nailed us. I asked my partner, "What did you do?" Turns out, he had superglued that note, which was on a manila envelope half, to the windshield of the sergeant's personal vehicle. We watched as he went back to the station to try to find something to scrape it off, which took quite some time. I thought we'd get in trouble, but he never said anything to us ever again and mostly left us alone after that. He also turned out to be a fairly decent supervisor after a while. I'm retired now after a decade in the Army and nearly 30 years in law enforcement, and the old war stories are all I have left, but this one fit this sub. Cheers. The next story is titled, "The New Neighbors." Well, I had a heck of a weekend that should have been nice and relaxing. To start, I went to visit my parents this weekend, who are both JUSTYES. My parents live in a fairly expensive and safe public neighborhood that they retired to after a long career life. Nice school in the community, a few community pools, a few trails in the same area. Average homes here are around 1.5 million. But because it's a public community, meaning it has no gate to enter, it picks up crime every few years. Lately there have been break-ins near the top area of the community. When there is crime in a normally safe area, this can put some people on edge, reporting everything. My mom got reported for walking the family dog at 7 p.m. on the same loop she does every day at the same time for the past 5 years. A bit on me, I'm 6 feet, big beard, bald head, moderately built, and tend to wear button-down shirts when I'm not working. Where my story begins is just outside my parents' place. Since it's a public community, all the streets are public as well. It isn't illegal to park here if you aren't a resident. It's just out of the way of anything but home, so there isn't really a reason anyone who isn't visiting or living here to park here. I have a brand new Chevy Colorado ZR2 truck. I parked it literally outside my parents' house and visible from their living room window, which is where we were sitting and talking. I'd say about 45 minutes later a tow truck pulls up and starts hooking up to my truck. I ran out yelling obscenities. Tow truck says they had a call about an illegally parked vehicle. After explaining that it's a public area and it is by no means illegal to park here, I asked for the contact info of the reporting individual. I didn't get much, just a first name. Karen, just for the sake of the story. I asked my parents and they gave a fair-sized frown like they already knew it had to be her. My parents had new neighbors that moved across the street a few months back. I'll save some of their stories for another time, I'd rather not get too sidetracked. I walk over to the house, see various toys and such all over their front side of the house. A bit messy, but I was a mess as a kid too. Knock knock. No answer. Ring the buzzer, which is one of the Ring cameras. I then hear a bit of yelling at her kids to stop running around. Now I know she's home, so I just kept ringing the door. As I'm waiting, I notice that she has multiple cameras on me, important later. She finally answers the door. She asks me what I want. In a bitchy tone. In a calm voice because she seemed a bit annoyed already. Why did you call a tow truck on my vehicle? Karen. You shouldn't be parking there. I've never seen you before. It's illegal to park here if you're not a resident. We don't need convicts around here looking for homes to case. Up. Convicts. What the duck? Why the duck would you think that? This is a public street, I can legally park here anytime I wish. I'm visiting my parents and have a right to park here without being towed. Leave my truck alone or I'm not even going to elaborate. I walked away. Not 10 minutes later I looked into the window to see two boys maybe 10 years old egging my truck. I ran outside, grabbed the hose and sprayed the boys and my truck down. Thank God for a thick wax coat. Guess which house those two boys ran to? I decided to leave it be. I'm leaving in 30 minutes anyways. 15 minutes later, a police officer walks in front of our door. I open and talk with the officer. P.O. P.O. Is that your truck? Up. Yes, it is, officer. P.O. We received a report that the owner of that truck was driving recklessly in the neighborhood and almost ran over two children. After getting out of the vehicle he yelled at the children and proceeded to hose them down with a strong water hose. Up. Officer, that's a heck of a story. Would you be interested in coming into my parents' home and we'll pull up the cameras while I explain my side of the story? He accepted, and we entered the house. While we viewed my parents' cameras and I explained the sequences leading up to the current. I explained the full conversation I had with Karen, including her insinuating that I was a convict and that I partially made a threat. I apologized that I should have caught myself sooner. I also mentioned the multiple cameras Karen has at her door. P.O. Thank you for your time. I may be back in a bit after I have a talk with your neighbor. 20 minutes and bit of yelling in the background later. P.O. I've talked with the neighbor about her and her children's actions. Will you be interested in pressing charges for the destruction of property? Op. No, officer, they're just kids, likely doing what Karen told them to. Were you able to check her cameras? P.O. Alright. No, she denied access. She shouldn't be bothering you again, but if she does, please don't hesitate to call the non-emergency line and ask for myself directly. I left not long after. So far there hasn't been any retaliation against my parents. The last story is titled, We Can't Move the Trash Can? Fine, it will stay where it is. When we started going back to the office during the last few months of COVID, people were very careful about touching commonly touched objects, such as stair rails and door handles, mostly because they were cautious about germs but also kinda scared of getting COVID that way. The men's bathroom's trash can was placed next to a wall, between the sinks and the door. This way, you would throw out your wet paper towel and then go over to the door and leave. This meant you had to use your bare hands to open the door. Someone, never knew who, got the idea of moving the trash can right next to the door, so that you could open it with the paper towel still in your hand and then throw it out as you leave. This was great, because you no longer had to open the door with your bare hands, and people felt safer that way. The only problem was that it was a bit in the way. You had to move an inch or two to the left to not walk into it, which was not a problem because the door and the hallway were pretty wide anyway. The office safety people found out about this after a few weeks, moved it back, and put up a sign asking not to move the trash can because it blocked the door. Cue the malicious compliance. Nobody moved it back to the door, but people were still not willing to open the door with their bare hands. So they continued using the paper towels to open the door, and threw them across the hallway, into the trash can as they walked out. Most people were good at landing the towels in the trash can, but some were not. It was not long before the paper towels started piling up around the trash can. It never got too bad, but it looked messy and dirty. Naturally, it took very little time before people started complaining about it. The office safety people ended up buying a smaller trash can that was attached to the wall, right next to the door. To this day most people use the paper towels to open the door and the bathroom is no longer messy, so everyone won. Thank you for listening.